A box in my archive told me not to catalog it. That's not metaphor. That's literal. Ink on paper, an instruction meant to outlive the hand that wrote it. And if you're listening to me now, understand this before we go any further. Archives don't only preserve history. They preserve decisions. Sometimes those decisions are noble. Sometimes they're cowardly. Sometimes they're made to protect the dead. More often, they're made to protect the living. The dust in the air was thick, as if the building had been holding its breath for decades. Down in the basement, it hangs in the light like a slow snowfall that never reaches the ground. People imagine archives as clean places. White gloves, climate control, librarians who whisper. They picture the past as something inert, safe behind glass. But the basement taught me the truth early. History isn't inert. It's patient. And patience, when it belongs to something buried, starts to feel like a threat. I didn't go downstairs because I was curious. I tell myself that sometimes, because curiosity sounds harmless. Curiosity is a personality trait. Curiosity doesn't put you on trial. But there are days when the archive feels like it's watching you back, waiting for the right weakness, grief, insomnia, guilt, and then quietly offering you a door you shouldn't open. You don't go down there by mistake. Not when the steps creak like they're counting. Not when the air changes halfway down and the smell of old paper closes around your throat like damp cloth. Not when you've worked in this building long enough to know which rooms are meant for storage and which rooms are meant for containment. There are rules to this work, not the ones in the handbook. The real rules. Rule 1. Never trust the tidy version. Rule 2. Summaries are where truth goes to become acceptable. Rule 3. Missing pages aren't accidents. They're verdicts. And the last rule, the one I learned late and paid for, goes like this. If a file wants to stay hidden, it will try to recruit you into hiding it. I found the box because it was in the wrong place. There's a shelf down there that should have held nothing. A deliberate gap. A clean absence in a room built from clutter. In any other building, you'd call it empty. In an archive, you learn to call it what it is. A decision. The box sat alone on that shelf, pushed back into shadow. Not stacked. Not integrated. Not acknowledged. It looked like something that had been returned and then quietly refused. It was tied with string, not tape. The knot was pulled too tight, biting into the cardboard like the box had been struggling for air. I brought it closer to the flickering lamp over the basement desk, an old workstation nobody uses unless they have to. The chair leans slightly left, as if even furniture develops habits down here. The label was half peeled, handwritten in a careful hand that wanted to look official. Eileen Mr. Flannan Isles, and beneath it, stamped so faintly, it almost looked ashamed of itself. Return to sender. Do not catalog. Do not catalog. ISNTA suggestion. It isn't even a warning. It's a method. Cataloging is how a thing becomes real inside a system. Once you assign it a number, once you enter it into the index, it becomes searchable, requestable, auditable. It becomes something another person can ask for, without you standing between them and the truth. So do not catalog means keep it personal, keep it private, keep it dependent on whoever happens to hold it. Keep it controllable. I stood there with the box in my hands longer than I should have. If I were the person I pretend to be at staff meetings, I would have walked upstairs and handed it to someone with authority. I would have said, calmly, this appears to be misfiled, but I've never been brave in the clean way people prefer. Institutions don't reward clean bravery. They reward quiet compliance. And I have a history with quiet compliance that I'm still trying not to name. I carried the box to the basement desk and set it down gently. Too gently, the way you set down something you don't trust not to wake up. My hands weren't shaking yet. That came later. I untied the string. The knot resisted like it had been made to punish impatience. When it finally gave, it did so abruptly, as if it had been holding something shut that shouldn't open. The lid lifted. The smell came first. Old salt, old ink, a cold damp that doesn't belong to paper alone. It smelled like a coastline in winter, like a room where wet coats never dry. The top folder was too thin to justify the box it lived in. A single cover sheet, typed without letterhead, without pride. Just a title and a date that carried its own gravity. The Flannan Incident. December 1900. Supplemental materials. Restricted in the corner was a circular stamp, faded but legible. Not because it was rare, because it had been retired. A stamp you stop using when people start noticing what you used it for. Board of Northern Lights. Administrative review, I felt my mouth go dry. It's strange what the body admits before the mind does. The mind bargains. The mind rationalizes. The mind says, it's just paper. The body is less interested in dignity. The body says, you've been here before. I should have stopped. I knew that. I even reached for the lid again. But there's a need that lives underneath caution, underneath professionalism, underneath the small performances we do to convince ourselves we're good people doing neutral work. It's not curiosity. It's the need to believe that if the past is organized correctly, it will stop bleeding into the present. I opened the folder. Inside wasn't a complete logbook, just the spine of one. Pages removed. Thread cut. Binding cracked like old bone. This wasn't decay. This was surgery. I ran a finger along the cut thread and felt a sting. A paper cut, sharp and clean. The kind that barely hurts until you realize you're bleeding. A dot of blood touched the binding. An accidental signature. For a moment, I just stared at it. My blood on an old record. Because it felt like a joke the building was making at my expense. As if the archive had finally found a way to mark me back. A memory rose up, unwanted and vivid. A desk years ago, a stamp, a supervisor's voice soft as velvet saying, and my own hand, steady then, moving one small piece of a record into a place it would do less damage. I won't tell you what I changed. Not yet. But I will tell you this. It was small enough to justify and permanent enough to ruin someone. That's how corrections work. They're never big at first. If they were big, you'd refuse. You'd feel like a villain. They start as a kindness. They become a habit. I turned the binding over. Something slipped free and fluttered down onto the folder like a last breath. A small piece of paper, cleaner than everything else in the box. Modern paper, yellowed by time, but not by era. A note that did not belong to 1900. A note that belonged to someone who understood exactly what they were doing. Handwritten in sharp black ink. Page 18 removed under instruction. Do not reference removal in public index. I read it once. Then again. Because I didn't like how calmly it was written. How ordinary it made the act of erasure sound. Under instruction. Do not reference. A person doesn't write that unless they believe they have authority, or unless they afraid of someone who does. And that final mark, that single initial, M. In my experience, initials are not anonymity. They're a shield. A way to leave proof without leaving a person. A way to say, someone did this, and you won't be able to call them by name. I sat there in the basement with my thumb bleeding lightly, and that note burning behind my eyes, and I understood something that shouldn't have surprised me. The Flannan mystery wasn't beginning with 3 vanished men. It was beginning with a living hand, recent enough to write a modern instruction, reaching into the past and deciding what the record was allowed to remember. I placed the note back inside the binding as carefully as if it could scream. Then I closed the folder. And I didn't move for a long time. Because now the investigation had a shape. Not a theory. Not a ghost story. A shape I recognized from the last time I made a correction. A missing page. A controlled silence. An instruction meant to keep the truth from becoming public property. And here is the part one need you to hear clearly. Because this is where stories stop being safe. A note like that doesn't belong to a file that has been sleeping untouched for 100 years. A note like that means the file has been handled. Recently, someone has been down here, in the same dust and damp, close enough to touch the spine, close enough to decide what you're allowed to know. So here's my warning, and the reason you should not leave yet. If M removed a page, then M didn't just edit the past. M left a trail, and trails in an archive don't lead to ghosts. They lead to systems. I am going to do the one thing that turns a mystery into a confrontation. I am going to pull the telegram register for December 1900. Because somewhere in that book, between 2 ordinary entries, there's a gap they tried to make look natural. A missing message renumbered into silence. And when I ask for that register, I won't be asking paper. I'll be asking the people who guard it. That S when Mara will look at me, really look at me, and say my name like it's an accusation. That S when I learn what the archive does to employees who stop behaving like employees. So before you decide this is just a story about three men and a lighthouse, ask yourself something simpler. If the record can be edited, how many people have been edited with it? Chapter 2 begins with a missing telegram entry, and it ends with proof that someone was there before the world was told anyone arrived. Because whatever happened on the Flannan Isles didn't end in 1900. It was edited. And if you're still listening, then you already know what that means. Subscribe now. The investigation begins.